Hello and welcome to Justice. I'm Judge Jeaninne Pirro. Thanks so much for being with us tonight. Let's get right to my open.
Sometimes you've got to cross the line between fantasy and reality to discover new realms of boundless pleasure.
If you aren't convinced there's a deep state after witnessing the antics of the mainstream media, big tech, and the Democrat Party so determined to destroy President Trump and get him out of office and prop up Joe Biden to get him into office, then come along with me. They didn't just steal the election from Donald Trump, they stole it from all of you. There was a fraud in their inducement of all things Biden in order to con you. They conned you and they conned America. They wanted to win no matter what, win at all costs. You didn't matter. You never mattered because it was never about you. It was about power, their power, the kind of power that corrupts absolutely. People in office too long. So long they have a sense of entitlement, so convinced of their superiority, their supremacy, they justify to themselves and occasionally to us. Like when Speaker Pelosi, in office for far too long, admits she held off getting you PPP money so that Donald Trump wouldn't get credit. She was willing to have you suffer as she waited for Biden because somehow she knew he would win, in spite of the fact President Trump wanted to give those hurting $2 billion. She would have none of it. She stole that from you. The deep state controlled the flow of information, the bad and the ugly about the Bidens, as they made up information, bad and ugly about the Trumps. They not only hid the dirt that many of us were telling you about the Biden crime family, disgusting, ugly, and treasonous, they made up lies and breathed never-ending life into them to destroy a president fighting for us. While the Bidens were on sale internationally to the highest bidder, including China, we now know Hunter is being investigated not only for taxes, but substantive crimes like money laundering, fraud, and racketeering. This investigation also involves Joe's brother James in reportedly a deeply immense international ongoing criminal investigation. Two of Hunter's former partners have already been convicted of fraud and securities crimes, one already in jail. But the deep state, big tech, and the Democrats and the mainstream media decided that you shouldn't hear about any of this. Certainly not before the election. Yet Eric Trump, a businessman, makes news as he is deposed by a scalp-hunting attorney general in New York who ran on a platform, an unethical platform of destroying the Trumps. The deep state brought out 50 former intelligence community heads to tell us that Hunter's laptop was nothing more than Russia disinformation. You know the names: Brennan, Clapper, Hayden, liars about the Trump-Russia collusion delusion, saying the documents on Hunter's laptop were a lie and Russia disinformation. Really? His laptop a lie? Yet Hunter never denied it. Russian disinformation? What do the Russians have to do with Joe Biden flying his son on Air Force 2 to China and Hunter's business with a bank connected to the Chinese Communist Party? The media joined in to deflect the efforts.
We know that this whole smear on Joe Biden comes from the Kremlin.
As you know perfectly well, I'm a journalist and a reporter, and I follow the facts. And there has never been any issues in terms of corruption.
Prosecutors do not open investigations based on disinformation provided by Russian intelligence.
Russian disinformation or foreign disinformation or even campaign disinformation period, peddling baseless conspiracy theories about Joe Biden and his son. This is most likely Russian propaganda.
Didn't the American people have the right to know of the entanglements that the Biden family had with China? They all lied to you. I told you this months ago. If you think we need someone in the Oval whose family is like pigs at the trough, Hunter, James, Patrick, collecting millions with a piece of the action going to the big guy, who then parlays our foreign policy to match their corrupt financial goals, whose son runs around the world with a vacuum sucking up millions from communist China, Russia, Ukraine, Kazakhstan, and more. The New York Post story and Senator Ron Johnson's report on the Biden family entanglements were censored. They were blacked out. The deep state was not going to let anyone report on it. They weren't even going to let you talk about it. The mainstream media wouldn't say it or print it. The intelligence community, the same bozos who insisted President Trump was a Russian asset simply because they wanted to destroy him, and the Democrats calling us crazy. All the while, Hunter never denied it was his laptop. And as it was blocked and we were prevented from hearing about a criminal investigation of Hunter, pending now, we know, since 2018. We weren't even allowed to talk to each other about it. Twitter, the Washington Post, Wikipedia, CBS, MSNBC, the New York Times, Politico, Axios, CNN, NPR Radio, they blocked that information so we could not assess the Biden's entanglements. And as one stated, we don't want to waste time on stories that are not real stories. Joe Biden lied to you too, saying he knew nothing about his son's business. He gave outright denials, while the witness who met with him that most of America never heard from said Joe was to get 10% of the millions of dollars his son was bringing in from China. And good old Bill Barr, the Attorney General, the one so quick to point out that Joe Biden is not under criminal investigation against Justice Department guidelines, must have really had his hand on this one, because a candidate for president's son under active criminal investigation for 2 years before an election is the kind of information that leaks out early and often. But we now know Bill Barr was the ultimate do-nothing deep stater there to defend the status quo. And now Eric Swalwell, another bozo who had entanglements with the Asian honeypot, Christine Fang, or Fang Fang, a Chinese spy accused of trading sex for secrets for years. She befriended Swalwell in 2012, raised money for and bundled money for Swalwell's campaign, even placing an intern in his congressional office. Swalwell, like Dianne Feinstein, both Democrats, got a warning that they were involved with Chinese spies. Donald Trump, on the other hand, was advised of nothing but set up by James Comey, who wanted to leak information to make it look like he, Trump, was a Russian asset. So Swalwell, when asked about the Chinese intern placed there by the Chinese spy in his congressional office, had a perfect deep state response: "We need more money so we can vet the interns." And in spite of all this, Swalwell ran for president, and he sits on our National Intelligence Committee trashing President Trump as a Russian spy when it was he who was under the spell of a Chinese spy. So here we are on December 12th, with 10% of voters saying they would change their vote if they knew of Hunter Biden's entanglement with China. But the Democrats had a plan, and it began when they introduced H.R. 1 on January 3rd to expand voting rights and to get as many people voting as early as possible. They had a race against the clock. How much would they be able to get past the American people before the American people knew the truth? They would need big tech, the mainstream media, all the Democrats in sync, and even the United States Attorney General to make sure nothing leaked about the Biden crime family. They would continue the Russia hoax, even though there was no proof. And the pandemic allowed them to change the voting process in violation of both federal and state constitutions. But it's not too late for the courts to recognize that a fraud was intentionally perpetrated on the American people. That by not allowing information to penetrate the public sphere and then create a fantasy of corruption against a sitting president, they could bring in a family whose very presence reeks of international blackmail and corruption. Yes, they protected their Trojan horse deep state candidate who has answered little, if anything, in the last year. And today, as a vaccine is announced in historic time, they trash him in spite of his sheer determination and caring for us that made it happen. God help us if we are to face the deep state without him, Donald Trump, as the barrier protecting us. And that's my open. Let me know what you think on my Facebook and Twitter, #Judge Jeaninne. And if you like my opens, you'll love my new book, Don't Lie to Me, available for order now. And here with my reaction to my open and much more, House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy joins me now. Good evening, Congressman McCarthy.
Good evening. Thanks for having me back.
All right, Congressman, I talked about Congressman Swalwell and his entanglements with this Chinese spy, after which he was allowed to then sit on the National Intelligence Committee by Nancy Pelosi. How does that happen when he was involved with this spy for years, and apparently his family, as recently as this week, his father and brother were still in Facebook contact?
This is very serious, and it goes much deeper than just Eric Swalwell. We now find, I recently read today, that there's an ethics complaint against Eric Swalwell, too. Remember what the Ethics Committee is. This is the place that people get to see and keep American secrets. It's something that most members of Congress don't get to see or read. You only get placed on this committee by one person, your leader. And Nancy Pelosi placed Eric Swalwell on this committee as a very junior member, which is very difficult to do, even though she knew this information, and now she kept it. So did Adam Schiff. But what's even more telling to me is, why did Eric Swalwell just a week ago criticize the Director of Intelligence, John Radcliffe, on his report about what China is doing? Why did he take China's side and attack an American? It raises more questions. When did the Speaker know it? What did she know? And what actions did she or Adam Schiff take?
Well, in addition to that, I suspect that there will be a review of whatever legislation he was involved in or may have voted on as it relates to China, and whatever his actions were legislatively. Will there not be?
Well, I'm very concerned because up to the majority, it seems as though Nancy Pelosi is doing nothing about it. But there's even more to this. Why did Nancy Pelosi and the Democratic leadership pull out of the bipartisan task force on China? They did it in the last days. Why did Adam Schiff criticize the President Trump when he shut down that corrupt consulate of China's in Houston, where everybody knew all the spies were? He criticized the president about it. What does the Chinese Communist Party have on the Democrats? I don't know what it is, but it must be quite powerful. And how can Eric Swalwell stay? Go ahead.
Well, it appears that the Chinese have this vast plan where they're infiltrating politicians, a lot of them in California, Silicon Valley, and lower levels, whether they're mayors, and this one in particular, Christine Fang, admits having sex with at least two mayors. And curious, Swalwell won't say anything about whether or not he had any physical involvement with her, and he gets away with that, and that's the end of it. And they then bundle money for them as they move up the political ladder. So you had Swalwell from City Council going to Congress, and in a minute running for president.
That's exactly. Think about it. The Manchurian candidate here of Eric Swalwell. They found him in the City Council. They bundled money to help him get to Congress. Who knows? And another question I have, did someone try to influence Nancy Pelosi to put him on the Intel Committee? Then he's running for president. But what's worse about this, the chair of the Intel, Adam Schiff, knew this. He knew this the whole time they were trying to impeach the president. Everything that Eric Swalwell accused the president of, he did. And Nancy Pelosi, the Speaker of the House, the third in line to the presidency, knew about this and kept him on the committee. The real question will come January 3rd. Now that members of Congress know this information, and only the leader can put them on the committee, if you vote for Nancy Pelosi as Speaker, you're also voting to put Eric Swalwell back on the Intel Committee and Adam Schiff as the chair while knowing this information.
And this is all up to Nancy Pelosi if she's reelected as Speaker.
She puts on the Democrat, she names the Democrats to the Intel Committee, and I name the Republicans to the Intel Committee. It is the hardest committee to get on.
Interesting, and he gets on it. And the fact that he and Adam Schiff, both of them on the Intel Committee, did nothing but trash President Trump on a Russia collusion hoax that even Mueller could, and 19 pit bulls that he hired, couldn't find an iota of evidence on, and yet they continue to lie to the American people. You know, there is a deep state in this country, and it is the Democrats in sync with big tech and the mainstream media. And if you're not on top of this every day, you don't know that what's going on.
So true. And for this to carry on, remember, this isn't the first Democrat to get in trouble. Senator Feinstein, the body person, the person who drove her, who heard all of her phone calls, was a Chinese spy for 20 years. They focus on Silicon Valley. And when the director of Intel, John Radcliffe, brought out his report, he was explaining of how vast the Chinese are spying on us, down to the city council level, down to mayors. And who is the one congressman to go out and attack that and say it was wrong? Eric Swalwell. I wonder why he said that. It just raises more questions why there is now an ethics complaint against him and why he should not be serving on the Intel Committee.
On that committee. Real fast. Now, positive news on the vaccine. Why does it seem that Joe Biden is trying to take credit for this vaccine? And don't you think we should call it the Trump vaccine, given everything that he's done?
Well, the president deserves a tremendous amount of credit of the thousands of millions of lives he's going to save because of Operation Warp Speed. He told the American public what he was going to do. He pushed to get us to this point by keeping it safe and secure. And we're not having one vaccine, we're going to have numerous vaccines. And his ability to have those dosages already made. So as soon as that FDA acts, the American public can start taking the vaccine. The president deserves credit. History is going to be very kind to what he was able to do. And people are going to study this because this is remarkable that he was able to move industry, government in a time of crisis that, remember, was created in China, something we did not invite, that President Trump is going to defeat.
Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy, thanks so much for being with us tonight.
Thank you, John.
And still ahead, Trump campaign attorney Jenna Ellis, Congressman Doug Collins, and a small business owner struggling to survive. But first, lockdown nation. The backlash continues to grow as Americans fight back against the Dems' outrageous restrictions. Congressman Steve Scalise weighs in next. My next guest says the Democrats are hypocrites who won't even follow their own rules. House Minority Whip Congressman Steve Scalise joins me now. All right, good evening, Congressman. Great to have you here. So what say you, before we even get to whether or not there's a valid reason behind these lockdowns, to law enforcement saying, no, we're not going to do it?
Well, great to be back with you, Judge. And look, I mean, think about some of these mayors who have been trying to defund police, and they don't want them to lock up criminals, but then they tell them to go lock up the local restaurant owner who's just trying to make ends meet and keep people employed during Christmas. Talk about misplaced priorities of these local leaders, and then they're going to try to dump it all on our hardworking men and women in uniform. So, you know, law enforcement wants to be out there keeping our streets safe. They don't go to work every day so they can go arrest a local restaurant owner. This is ridiculous.
Well, you know what's amazing is that Kate, I think it was Kate Brown, I don't know, from Oregon, the governor there, she said, you know, you might want to, you know, if people for Thanksgiving have more than 6 people at the table, you might want to call the local police. I mean, I just have never heard anything like this. I mean, what if you have 7 kids? What are you supposed to do, throw one out? But then you say to yourself, you know, what is their end game? Why are they putting like a yoke on the necks of the American people? What are they getting out of it? They're not listening to it. Pelosi isn't listening to it. Lori Lightfoot from Chicago isn't, and Gavin Newsom isn't. And what do they get out of pressuring the middle Americans?
Judge, this is part of the government control movement. This is what socialists do. They want to run your life. This isn't about science. If it was about science, these governors, Speaker Pelosi, a lot of these mayors that you've been highlighting that are hypocrites, they're out there telling you you can't go to your favorite restaurant, but go to their favorite restaurant. They're saying you can't hang out with your family for Thanksgiving or Christmas, and then you see pictures of them in Cabo hanging out with their family. You know, again, if the science was there, it wasn't about, if they were risking people's lives, they wouldn't be doing it themselves. They are crushing these small businesses, the millions of jobs that are tied to it, and they just don't seem to care. Speaker Pelosi won't even bring up a bill on the House floor that would get almost unanimous support that would allow these small businesses who are struggling to get another round of PPP loans, just because, as she said the other day, she doesn't want to help them. She's waiting for a new president. My God, these businesses can't wait. And for them to see that it's only about politics, it just disgusts people. And then the Democrat hypocrisy on top of that of do as they say, not as they do, is what really undermines their credibility.
And you know, so many Americans are so fed up when we saw the Democrats lose so many seats in the House when they said there was going to be such a blue wave, and then they say that Joe Biden got 80 million votes. I mean, you know, you have to say to yourself, something is off here. Something is absolutely off, and we'll see what the courts end up doing. But let's talk about the mainstream media and Joe Biden and Kamala Harris being on the cover of Time magazine. What's your take on that?
Well, if this doesn't show just how they were all rooting and cheering for Joe Biden for a year. The whole year they've been trying to get Donald Trump out of office because they don't agree with what he's doing, because he's actually doing what he said he was doing, cleaning up the mess in Washington, got our country back on track. And they've never agreed with that kind of tough America First strategy that worked. And so they wanted to unravel what he was doing from day one. You know, putting them as time. It's like giving Cuomo an Emmy award for goodness sake. I mean, you know, he's crushing businesses still to this day. He killed thousands of seniors in nursing homes, and they give him an award for it.
Yeah. Well, the amazing part of it, Congressman, is that it reminds me of when Barack Obama was elected and they nominated and then gave him the Nobel Peace Prize before he did anything.
Right.
And, you know, he got us more entangled in wars. And President Trump is the one who's gotten us out of wars, and he's got a peace deal. Now, the latest addition to that is Morocco, along with Israel and the other countries in the Middle East. It's such a sad commentary on the hate in this country. Will it ever go away?
Delivered so much Middle East peace. It needs to go away, but I think people are tuning that stuff out. You know, I don't know how many people will be buying that Time magazine Person of the Year award compared to maybe 15, 20 years ago, but it's a lot lower number because people have just tuned out the liberal bias. They know it, they see it, and they're tired of it. But look, President Trump should have gotten the Nobel Prize for Peace just for what he did with UAE and Bahrain, and as you said, now Morocco. There are other countries in line as well, because he's actually delivered. He stood by our allies, and he's delivered a more peaceful world, and for that they hate him.
Yes.
Because the same people like John Kerry, who said there would never be a peace deal, they never know what they're talking about.
Yeah, well, they're the haters. Congressman Steve Scalise, thanks so much for being with us this weekend. President Trump continues to fight, and why not? He had a remarkable first term in office with accomplishments that the mainstream media and liberals worked overtime to ignore. But they can't be forgotten. So let's talk about it with my next guest, co-author of the book, Trump, America First. David Bossing joins me now. Good evening, David. A lot to talk about, but what stands out to you as the president's biggest accomplishments?
There's just so many, Judge, and you know there's just so many to name if you're trying to come up with the president's accomplishments over the last 4 years. But just Operation Warp Speed, where this president put the biggest public-private partnership since World War II into play, creating a vaccine for this virus that was not even known about 10 months ago. These things take 8 or 10 years to create vaccines for. This president put the full force of the American people, our entrepreneurs, our scientists, our medical experts, just in a room and made sure that they did everything they could to create a
vaccine. The economy, what he did to build the economy, rebuild the stagnant economy that he took over from Obama, Biden, is just an unbelievable thing. The record low unemployment, record employment, real wage growth for the first time in a decade. The list just goes on and on and on, and I am so proud of this president to just of what he set his mind to. He taught this Republican Party to fight, and we're never going to go back, Judge. That's the one thing that this president has done, is taught the Republican Party to fight the Democrats every minute of every day, and that's what we're going to continue to do.
You know, that's an interesting comment. I mean, certainly Operation Warp Speed. I think we've got 3 vaccines about to come out and be rolled out. I mean, that is unbelievable. And it took a businessman to do that. But you're absolutely right, David. I mean, the idea of fighting, I mean, the Republicans were always kind of proper, and, you know, and the Democrats come out, and we saw how they fight. They fight on the streets. They fight, you know, through Antifa. They fight through their progressive left. They just don't give up fighting. And I think that this president taught the Republicans how to do that. And I think that not only is that important, but I think the whole concept of people feeling proud of their being Americans, you know, of recognizing who we are, from whence we come, and that we're a nation under God.
100%, Judge. But let's just go back 4 years ago in 2016. The Obama administration was investigating the incoming Trump administration. Our transition team was already under investigation. They didn't attend. No Democrats attended his inauguration. They said he is not a legitimate president, and they refused to work with him. They fought over everything he did, and the mainstream media went right along with it. So this president, what he's done, all these accomplishments that he's had, has been up against the backdrop that people forget. You know, I got to tell you, you know, we're not done here yet fighting over 2020, but Joe Biden's got a long way to go, and he's going to have to pay for a lot of the sins for the last 4 years.
Well, we'll see about that. David Bossie, always good to have you on, Justice. Thanks so much. And coming up, high stakes in the Georgia Senate runoffs. What could the Democrats winning really mean for the country? Congressman Doug Collins weighs in next. All eyes continue to be on the battle in Georgia as 2 runoffs in the state will determine control of the Senate. Joe Biden even planning to stump for the 2 Democrat candidates next week. Georgia Congressman Doug Collins joins me now to discuss it all. All right, Congressman, I watched the debate. I don't want to get into too much of it, but what I'll tell you is this. The only thing that sticks out to me is this. Georgia's a conservative state. All right? We got this guy Warnock who's a preacher, but doesn't believe in the military or the police, and believes in abortion and thinks that the Bible supports abortion. Who's crazy, me or him?
It's not you, Judge. That's true. It's good to see you again. No, Raphael Warnock down here is trying to pull the ultimate bait and switch in Georgia. He's trying to appear as this, nice guy who has puppy ads and everything's okay, but yet came out with a tweet just the other day, and I've been calling him on this one for a while, says I'm a pro-choice pastor. And in that debate, he said the room is too small for a woman and her doctor in the government. Well, my question for a pastor is, where's God in that? He should have been there to start with, and my scripture tells me that it's something different. I'm not sure where he's at. But he's also against the police. He's also against the military. He said you couldn't serve God and the military. And Judge, I'm a military chaplain for 19 years in the Air Force. I served in Iraq. I'll tell you right now, you better know how to serve God and be a better military person to start with. This is a man who doesn't want people to know what he really feels, and it really came out when he was asked about packing the court. He was asked about packing the court, and he said, I really haven't thought about that. And when he says that, it's just so disingenuous. He's thought about it, but the counselors have told him, you can't say how liberal you are because you'll turn off voters. It's time Georgia turns him back.
Yeah, well, then I would have said you haven't thought about it, then make sure you don't vote one way or the other because you haven't thought about it. You didn't give it any advance notice. Let's talk about President Trump and Governor Kemp. President Trump just tweeted that how does Governor Brian Kemp allow certification of votes without verifying signatures, and despite the recently released tape of ballots being stuffed, his poll numbers have dropped like a rock. He is finished as governor. All right, I guess he tweeted that to you too. So what's that about? I mean, in the end, you've got campus, everybody's coming after him, but they should. Why won't he call another session of the legislature?
Well, I think that this is what you're seeing is very much frustration from the president. He and I've talked about this a lot. The governor is trying to use a political answer, saying he didn't want to call the session together because it would be overturned by a court. The problem is there's things he can do. I think he has called for signature verification, but the Secretary of State down here has said that he doesn't want to do that because that would shine a light on this bad consent decree that we have down here, in which basically Raffensperger, the Attorney General, and the governor got rolled by Stacey Abrams and the Democrats to softening and weakening the signature requirement down here. Look, this is something that we now have a lot of eyes. The president himself last Saturday down here in Georgia said, look, we're going to be focused on this. Raffensperger knows that we're focused on it. The election's people are. But one of the things we got to have down here, Judge, is people have to turn out to vote. If they don't turn out to vote, nothing else that we're trying to put in place matters.
Before we get to that, I want to stop for a second. What did you say that Stacey Abrams rolled over people? How did she roll over this guy Raffensperger to get him to violate the Constitution and the legislature? How did, would she come in with something? How did he roll over? Why?
Well, what happened down here is you have to go back. This goes back all the way to the previous governor's election that she never thought that she lost. And she brought a lot of suits down here claiming voter suppression and problems in the Secretary of State's office.
Yeah, well, who cares?
Yeah, well, they wanted to solve the lawsuits, Jeaninne. That's what they wanted to do. They wanted to get rid of the lawsuits, and so they decided to come up with this consent decree that most of us didn't know. I know David Schaefer, the GOP chairman down here, most of us didn't know what was going in this. In fact, I know from people who told them it was probably not a good idea, definitely not to sign it. But when they did, they gave away verification, weakened it to any signature on file. In other words, I can make the application and the ballot match. That's all I need to do. We know certain counties didn't follow that. It also talked about not removing people from voter rolls.
Then you know
also
what?
got into actually sending out ballots.
Here's the bottom line. That's stupid. All right? If he doesn't have the spine to stand up against something that's a clear violation of statutory law and the Constitution, he should get out of office. Now, here's the second issue. If the first vote is corrupt in that it doesn't go along with the constitutional requirement, what makes you think the next vote for this runoff is going to be legit?
Well, the biggest issue we have now is we went through it the first time, and with looking at the verification, looking at the voters. Look, if we had not asked and found out these issues, we wouldn't even know where to look come January 5th. But as the president said and others have said, we now have more eyes than we've had on before. We have the Secretary of State knows that they're under scrutiny right now. We know these local election officers know that they're under scrutiny right now to do it the proper way that it has to be done, because so many things have been found out that are not right. But the big key here is if we don't actually follow through, and the president said this the other night. He said, look, we're going to follow this through. We'll have these eyes. We're going to make sure they do it right. But you got to turn out to vote. You don't have a voter, it doesn't matter.
Congressman Doug Collins, thanks so much for being with us.
Jay, it's always good to be with you.
Small business under siege as Democratic governors continue to enforce unreasonable COVID restrictions. One salon owner is fighting back, and I speak with him in a Justice exclusive next.